Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Padres, but also the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast for Wednesday, September 4th. As always, I am your host, Javier Reyes. Host with sometimes occasionally, but definitely not always the most. You might be familiar with some of my baseball-related work at places like justbaseball.com, DOTCOM.com, and I'm being joined by, of course, again, 2 days in a row, talking to this guy, talking to this goon who's rocking the glasses because he's feeling studious. He's prepped for this episode. He's ready. Mr. Millard Thomas of Locked On Diamondbacks. How are you?
And also, we had an 11 a.m. podcast. I went out last night, woke up at 10:45. I was like, I'm not throwing the contacts in, just glasses today, baby.
I love it. I love it, man. Just let it roll. You just got to let it roll sometimes. And I think it fits, right? That both of us have the glasses today because it's a very special episode today, ladies and gentlemen. I would actually argue, the creative juices for me on my pod, admittedly, haven't been flowing as much lately. Just been doing a lot of things and dealing with a lot of stuff. So it's hard. But you said about a month ago, what if we did a fantasy draft, right? In honor, right? In honor of it being football season, in honor of everybody who's listening to this podcast who their own fan. We're doing a fantasy draft on what, Millard? What are we doing?
We're drafting the best players who we've basically let go, traded away, basically making the best version of a team of former players that we just said, hey, we don't want that superstar on our team anymore. Let's get rid of them.
It's much discussed. He's a man who takes a lot of shots, and he gets some home runs. Joe Musgrove, right? Oh, that's a home run. Jake Cronenworth. Oh, that's a good one, even though you slandered him on the last pod. Oh, Juan Soto, what a beast. Oh, Tatesa. But then there's also some mix-ups. So everybody likes slandering AJ Preller now and then. And the Diamondbacks as well have had a lot of glaring, and I mean glaring mistakes. Arguably just as bad. Arguably, it's close. It's close. It's close. All right, I'll calm down a little bit. Max Scherzer obviously probably being the most famous one. But we're keeping it to 2014 because that is because AJ Preller, that's when his tenure started. So we're counting players that were traded away from our teams, former players. Free agency doesn't count because I think it's just a little bit different and it's not necessarily wholly bad if you don't re-sign a player. But with a trade in this case, and depending on the players, I just think it's a lot more fun because it gives us time to roast ourselves a little bit. I think that it's always, you need a little bit of that because we are such egomaniacs, you and I, that I think every now and then we need to be humbled just a little bit. The way it's going to work is 6 position players. It doesn't matter what position exactly. It doesn't have to be you're filling out first, second, third, or fourth because there's not enough, frankly, that we feel like talking about that play every single position. And then 3 pitchers. They can be, Millard can draft Padres, former Padres, and I can draft former Diamondbacks, whatever. That's what we're doing. And it's going to be a lot of fun. Millard, are you ready?
I do have one question. Are we doing a snake draft?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, man, that's a good question. I didn't even think of that.
Snake draft? Yeah,
snake draft with 2 people? I feel like no.
Okay.
I feel like no.
Well, I was just going to make all the dumb, look who's back up again. It's me.
Yeah.
But yeah, we don't have to do a snake draft.
We would basically just be making 2 picks in a row. Yeah.
Let's do like an auction draft. Let's get like a little fab budget going.
Get a little fab budget. Have the silent countdown going in the background, and then we have to reveal how much we'll pay for a guy. That would be great, but probably a little bit too complicated for us. So the only question now is who goes first and who goes second.
I got a dime here because you're a dime, Javi. So I'm gonna flip this and see. Perfectly.
That was a good flip. And it is. Let's see here.
It's heads, but we didn't decide who.
Yeah, we didn't decide.
So call it in the air when I flip it, Javi.
Okay,
ready?
I got you. This is great audio content.
What do you think it is? Call it right now.
Tails.
It is tails never fails, baby. So you go first. Congrats, dude. Don't steal my pick, but we'll see where you go.
Thank you, sir. Of course, I gave Millard a list. We both were exchanging our thoughts on some former players, and there's a lot, ladies and gentlemen. Believe me, there's a lot of good ones. But with this, I'm going to start off with who is probably the front runner for the National League MVP award. He's had a very good career. He is a first baseman who was able to steal 30 bases one year. That's how crazy he is. A fantasy baseball legend and a guy who, right when you thought all right, clearly the best days are behind him. He came right back. That is the gold one. That is the golden boy, Mr. Paul Goldschmidt. Welcome to my team, sir.
That's a tough one, Javi. He was going to be my number one pick. There's only one MVP on our list today, and that is Paul Goldschmidt after he takes home the award this year. Of course, Dbacks franchise legend, arguably, best Dbacks player of all time. He's top 2, top 3 right there. So tough to see him go off the board first. I would have definitely chosen Paul Goldschmidt number 1 as well, so I can't hate that pick. But I think that makes my number 2 pick pretty clear for me now, because I think there was a tier 1 of top 2 players who I wanted. Paul Goldschmidt was definitely number 1. And since I'm number 2, I guess this guy just fell to me at the number 2 spot. So I'm going with Trea Turner to start it off, because now that Trea Turner has tapped into that power department, this is a whole new player, because we already know about the sprint speed. We know about the swaggy sliding that he likes to do, right? When he's going home to third base, he does that little pop-up, the coolest thing in the game. So I want him not for his bat, but what he can do with the intangibles of the swag and stuff like that. He's going to sell tickets for me. He's fun to watch. He's fun for the cool kids and everything like that. So Trea Turner, we don't even care about your bat. We care about your slide. So come on down for the number 2 overall pick.
Absolutely, sir. I mean, it's a great pick. Trea Turner's great. There was a point when I think the fools of the world thought that he was the just indisputable best shortstop, and then Francisco Lindor decided to have a little bit of a say about that this year. Just a little bit of a say about that. But yeah, I mean, Trea Turner's great. The former Padre, he was traded for Will Myers in that big deal that the Padres acquired Myers, and I think the Nationals got what's his name? Joe something. Nope. Blanking.
I'll look it up real quick.
Yeah, you got. We probably should have brought up what the trades were in the first place.
But yeah, I was gonna say, as you started talking about it, that was actually good background. Like, maybe we should have background.
Yeah, we probably should have background. And to remind people, the Paul Goldschmidt trade was for Carson Kelly, Luke Weaver, and Andrew Young. So that return, considering that, I think that what might have happened with the D-backs here is they said, all right, we're not going to be competing necessarily. Let's trade this guy because he, like most baseball players, will have a fall off. Unfortunately, he did not have a fall off. So for the D-backs, it is looking pretty bad. If he had a fall off, that's one thing, but he clearly hasn't. So two stars traded from other teams in this division for what feels like nothing. The Rockies, of course, with Arenado, who is the other superstar over with the Cardinals. The Cardinals just taking advantage of dumb teams in our division. Isn't it crazy? Just crazy stuff, man.
Yeah, I mean, respect to the Cards for doing it, man. They just basically added the 2 best players in the National League from the NL West on their team, and now it's like Goldie and Arenado are going to finish 1 and 2 in MVP voting. It's actually disgusting to see as the D-backs, and I'm sure Paul Holden, as a Rockies fan, he hates to see.
Yeah, man, it's pretty rough, but I think that makes it my turn, right?
Oh, I guess so. I guess if we're not doing the snake, you're up then, Javi.
Yeah, because then it would just be us picking twice in a row. That's what would happen there. All right, folks.
So who are you going?
With my next pick, I would, if we were being little cretins, I would pick Luis Castillo, pitcher of the now Seattle Mariners. But we agreed before this that he's just technically not a former Padre. It's close. Let us in the comments if you think this should count. But there was a trade between them and the Marlins from a while back involving Colin Ray, and basically the physicals were really bad on him, so the Marlins complained about it, rightfully, if they didn't get the right thing back. And then the Padres retained Castillo, and then the Marlins the Padres retained Colin Ray, and the Marlins retained Castillo, and the Marlins still ended up trading him away again, which is hilarious, by the way. They had the chance to not trade Luis Castillo twice, but still did it. But if you guys think that technically counts, maybe, but I don't think it does, because he would have had to have been on the Padres to become a former Padre through a trade, so I don't think it counts.
It's basically like when Carmelo Anthony got traded to the Hawks for a day. It's like, do you consider him like a Hawk? Yeah, it's like
exactly. It's just a fun little footnote to bring up.
Yeah.
For my next pick, I have to go with, he's not my favorite pitcher in baseball anymore. He was for a little bit. He was, because I loved that he was the Joey Gallo of pitchers. Walk, strikeouts, home runs. That's all this man did. Oh. And the D-backs probably made the right decision at the time of trading him. The problem is that he then figured things out. He became a thick boy. He blew up with the Blue Jays, won the Cy Young. It is my boy, although he's actually genuinely just good now, Robbie Ray. He had a little bit of a fall off to start the season. He was getting absolutely killed by a lot of teams. And it was rough, and everyone said, oh, including myself, small sample size, that's the problem here. But he bounced back in a major, major way, and he's been awesome. The only team he can't pitch against is the Astros. But in fairness, the Astros are good against everybody. So collecting one of my 3 pitchers, Mr. Robbie Ray, want to get him off the board because I got love for the guy.
Love that for you, because I definitely didn't want no part of Robbie Ray. Don't want him on my team. So I'm glad you picked him so I wouldn't have to, because there's a couple pitchers I like here more than a Robbie Ray. So I'm going to go with my next selection. I'm also going to go starting pitcher. I'm going to take a better version of Robbie Ray, because he's just flat out a better all-time pitcher in Zach Greinke, who's probably going to make the Hall of Fame one day. Of course, on the biggest contract in D-backs franchise history when he got over a $200 million deal. The D-backs said, I don't want to learn from my mistakes. Madison Bumgarner, come on down. Let's give another veteran pitcher another fat deal so he could do nothing with our team. But Zach Greinke ended up being traded away to the Houston Astros, where he won a World Series. And in return, the D-backs got back Seth Beer, who hasn't done anything except for that walk-off against the San Diego Padres to start the season. JB Bruskakis, who's coming off an injury and basically been injured just through a whole time in the minor league. Same with Corbin Martin. But the 4th guy in that package back for Zach Greinke, because the D-backs got back 3 of the top 5 prospects in the Astros organization: Seth Beer, Corbin Martin, JB Bruskakis. But the 4th guy in that deal, Josh Rojas, who has been fantastic for the D-backs so far, but we're here to talk about Zach Greinke, so I'm taking him with my number 4 overall pick, the 2nd pick of my team. Zach Greinke, future Hall of Famer, Cy Young Award winner, multiple times finishing this top 5 Cy Young voting. I'm absolutely killing this draft to start.
You are killing it. I made a mistake. I got fooled by the allure of thick boy Robbie Ray. I was seduced by thick boy Robbie Ray. That's what happened here. And I forgot that, Greinke isn't necessarily great right now. I mean, he's lovely to watch, though, I will say. His little eephus pitch, it's still a blast to watch this guy with his 2 strikeouts a game. It's still chugging along. But you're right. You probably made the better pick there. I got a little bit ahead of myself, but I won't make that same mistake with my next pick, ladies and gentlemen.
Let's see if you're going to steal my guy.
Before we get into the next pick, ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk to you about betting. Maybe you want to make a bet on what me and Millard are going to say for the next pick, determining the best former Padres and Diamondbacks, or you're just a regular person who wants to bet on football or the World Series or what have you, and college football is heating up. It just started. Well, guys, betonline.net is your number 1 source for all of those odds and infos and games and stats and blah, blah, blah. All of it. They got it all. And let me tell you, find all the latest football league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including this year's opening week games. That's right, guys. Fastest and easiest way to check on all of your favorite sports and events. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Now it's my turn.
All right.
Now it's my turn, man. It's my turn. I messed up with my first pitcher.
It's all right.
I messed up with my first pitcher.
I'm glad
I'm not making that mistake again. I know that we only need 3 pitchers, but I want to solidify it right now. I'm going with my whatever pick this is. I forgot what number this is. My 3rd pick. The 6th overall pick, question mark, 5th overall pick in the draft. I'm going with Max Fried. World Series hero. He was great. Former Padre, and some people might forget that. Yeah, that's right. That's how bad it sometimes has been for the Padres. I was looking up the trade, actually, and it was involved in the Justin Upton deal. Granted, Max Fried was not nearly what he was back then. This is not a trade where you say, oh, we knew he was going to be good. In fact, he was kind of a little bit more of a tertiary piece when they did trade him. And he didn't really become great for a few years, and it took some time. So it's possible that maybe the Braves, being the good organization they are, have him, do what he does, but not do it for another team. Right? We don't always count that, but it's true. But he's been great for them. World Series champion. He was awesome in the playoffs, and he's awesome this year. 2.56 ERA. He doesn't necessarily all the strikeouts in the world that you want, but who cares? He limits the runs, and he's consistent. And I think he's going to be consistent for a good long while, by the way. I like the guy. I think that he can hold up. So that's my pick. Millard, what do you think?
Yeah, I was going to go Fried next because I think there's a big drop-off of the pitchers after Fried. I was glad you picked Robbie Ray because if I could have got Zach Greinke and Fried with my first 2 pitchers, that would have really stacked my team. So I love your Fried pick there. That basically means I'm done drafting pitchers until the very end because next up for me, this is more of a vibes thing for me because who knows? I don't know how you feel about this guy because he doesn't really play any position. He's basically a full-time DH, but he's one of the best offensive players in the league when he's right, when he's healthy, especially in his prime, because when the D-backs traded for him, he went on an absolute tear over 2 months stretch where he had like 27 home runs, set an MLB record, and that is JD Martinez, who basically had such an interesting career, broken pretty late into baseball. Wasn't really a power guy when he first got called up, and then kind of discovered himself with the Tigers. And basically, you look at like JD Martinez's like last 7 years. He's been one of the best power hitter sluggers in baseball. Like, he's legit like a pure contact hitter, 300 plus average, can hit for power, 30 plus home runs, RBI producer, WRC plus, OPS, basically any offensive stat. The only knock against JD Martinez is he's basically like a Nick Castellanos. You can't play him in the outfield. He has to be your full-time DH. And now that we have the universal DH, it works out. He's played most of his career in the American League. And when he did play in the National League with the Arizona Diamondbacks, he looked like maybe the best offensive player in the sport at that time. So JD Martinez, I'm going to slide him in at DH. I grew up a Red Sox fan, so you know I'm huge on the DH with Big Papi. Now we got JD Martinez on our team to be that RBI producer, home run producer in the middle of our lineup.
I like it. It's a good player, man. And it's true. I remember when the Red Sox first acquired him, and that was the same season that the Yankees acquired Giancarlo Stanton. And a lot of people were like, well, the Yankees clearly won the offseason. I mean, him and Judge are going to hit 800 home runs. But I remember, I was like, don't sleep on JD Martinez, though. I think JD Martinez, people were still having trouble believing it. They were still having trouble with this guy who, like age 25, 26, maybe 27, who used to be on the Astros, too. He used to be on the Astros, and they never really gave him a shot. Then he goes to Detroit, and everyone's like, where did this come from? And then he does it again, and they're like, okay, that's cute, but he's not going to do it again, right? And he only got better, and even in this kind of past his prime, still a decent player. He can still hit the ball pretty well. So depending on what team you are, you could probably use him. And a World Series legend, I think. I think they won with him, right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
World Series legend, near MVP, if not for Mookie Betts going superhuman that same year. Great pick, Miller. Great pick. I love it. Love it. You did great there. I'm going to one-up you. I'm going to one-up you. And I'm going to take the superior of Dbacks Martes. And that's Starling Javier Marte. That's right. Maybe you didn't know that. His middle name is Javier. Starling Marte. I think with the exception of Goldschmidt on this list, you could call Starling Marte probably the most consistent overall player that both of our teams have traded in one way since 2014. He's always there. He always plays a really solid defense. He's got speed. He's got a hint of power. He's going to hit for average. And later on, especially when he joins the Diamondbacks and then the Marlins and then the A's, he got a lot better at just overall on-base stuff, just walking a little bit more. And he's been great for the Mets this year. He's been great, and it's just there's such a high floor with him that you just kind of know what you're going to get. I know that the speed could eventually fall off and he might not steal as many bags, but bottom line is he's just solid. He's always there. He doesn't have health injuries and whatnot, and he's really easy to root for because his middle name is Javier. How can you not root for the guy? Starling Javier Marte. I imagine a player that also has been used in many fantasy baseball team names and what have you. And by the way, just a reminder, the Padres, I forgot to mention what the trade of Max Fried was. It was for Justin Upton and Aaron Northcraft. They sent back to the Braves Fried, Jace Peterson, Dustin Peterson, and Malik Smith. Forgot to mention that. And then also for Starling Marte. Do you remember what the trade was with the D-backs, my friend?
Oh, yes. I was going to pull it up right now because I was going to go on a quick rant about that because the D-backs traded Marte at the trade deadline because they didn't want to pick up his $8 million option for the next season because apparently that was too expensive. So they said, let's just trade him to the Marlins and get back your guy, Javier Reyes, Caleb Smith, and a prospect in Humberto Mejia. So just a terrible deal. And then the funny thing is, the very next season at the trade deadline, the Marlins send Starling Marte to the Oakland A's for Jesus Luzardo, a top 100 prospect who looks like a legit starting rotation member in the Marlins rotation. So how do the D-backs flip Marte for a Caleb Smith? Meanwhile, the Marlins flip him at another deadline just a season later for a top 100 prospect who's a legit starting rotation arm. Just malfeasance by the D-backs front office in that scenario. So don't even get me started on Starling Marte. He was a great addition. Loved him in the Marte Parte. Should have kept him less than $10 million. Did everything. Arguably the best D-backs player during that 2020 season. So I'm very upset that he didn't get re-signed. But for my 4th overall selection, there's still a lot of good position players. So I'm going to treat this like a fancy football draft where you wait on maybe wide receiver or quarterback because it's so loaded at that position. So I think I'm going to go actually back to pitcher here because there's one guy that kind of interests me among the other guys I see on this list. I'm going to go off the board a little bit. I'm going to go Craig Kimbrell, who doesn't feel as sexy of a name right now because of what he's done the last years, but Craig Kimbrell, if you remember, those first 7, 8, 9 years as a reliever, he was one of the best relievers of all time. Basically, the first 8 years of his career, he was like a sub two guy basically every year. Insane strikeout artist, had a great season his 1 year with the San Diego Padres with like a 1.5 ERA. And so for Craig Kimbrell, this is someone that led the league in saves from 2011 to 2014, 46, 42, 50, and 47. Then 2015, he was with the Padres, had a 2.58 ERA, had 39 saves that year as well. So I think Craig Kimbrell to be the back end of my bullpen guy. Like, we think of Craig Kimbrell now, we're like, oh man, that guy's shaky. But what he was doing from age basically 21 to age 30, one of the most historic closers we've ever seen during that time period.
Good stuff. Good stuff. You snagged easily the best closer that either of our teams have traded away in a while for sure. Just great stuff, man.
And you guys traded him to the Red Sox, I guess I should say, and I guess Manuel Margot was the headliner in that piece coming back.
Yeah, Manuel Margot, who did not pan out that much for the Padres. He was a good defensive player, but not as a batter. But I'm going to talk about someone that the Padres traded who panned out quite literally immediately for the other team. He wasted no time. And in my opinion, there is a case to be made that this is overall the worst move of AJ Preller's tenure. Ladies and gentlemen, of course, I'm talking about the guy who was giving us nightmares all season because of our ground ball gremlin at first base. And we could have had this other guy, and that's Ty France of the Seattle Mariners. I know he's been a little bit cold lately, but there is just something consistent about the bat-to-ball skills that I love. He's had some big hits before, which I like. He's young, and he even plays pretty decent defense. I like that. He has a vibe to him that we're going to look back on this and say, oh my God, that's really what they traded him for? Like, Austin Adams and Austin Nola? Like, that's what they traded him for? And they also sent over Andres Munoz? Oof. Oof. A really bad trade that when you look back at it, you're like, man, all of that for Austin Nola? I know he was hitting well that year, but geez, man, you can't wait a little bit on catcher? I mean, sheesh. So that one might arguably be the worst trade of AJ Preller's tenure.
Yeah, and France's numbers have come down a little bit since the All-Star break, but at the time, I advocated for France to have been on the All-Star team. I thought he was the best first baseman at the halfway point of the season. So France, he's had a breakout year, helping the Mariners, who seem to be locked into breaking their playoff drought this season. So very fun to see. So I like your Ty France pick because I think my next pick spiritually gives off the same energy because I was really debating between two former D-backs guys here. One that got, I won't give too much context in who the two guys I was debating. I'll just tell you who I'm going to take because this is all vibe. I gave you Trea Turner earlier with the swaggy slide. I got another swagged out player coming up. The man who might be the coolest player in all of baseball because I'm bringing up Jazz Chisholm.
There it is.
That Zach Gallen trade that we talked about in the first pod, I think 2 hours ago, Javier Reyes, because Zach Gallen for Jazz Chisholm, you can't think of a more win-win trade than that. Jazz Chisholm seems like he's going to be a future superstar shortstop, 25 kind of a guy, while Zach Gallen seems like a guy that could finish top 3 in Cy Young voting every season. So a win-win trade for both sides. And now we're bringing Jazz Chisholm home to play shortstop, maybe next to a Ketel Marte, but I guess that's not really the team he's going to be on. He's going to be in the lineup with JD Martinez, I guess, and I guess that's – and Trea Turner. Wow, look at that up the middle. I got Trea Turner, Jazz Chisholm, and then JD Martinez is my DH with a Greinke and a Kimbrell. I am just smoking this draft right now, Javier Reyes.
I will admit, the Jazz, it's actually remarkable how even of a trade that is. Gallen for Jazz Chisholm. Like, I honestly can't think of a trade that's been more even, honestly. Like, it's really great stuff. It's really great stuff. Maybe the Nationals have a potential to have an even trade where, maybe not even, but it could look okay for them because they really did get such a haul of prospects, but that's still unknown quantities and whatnot. But, sir, I'm going to take someone who certainly isn't an unknown quantity. I'm going to take someone who is, again, just really consistent and also really fun to root for. especially when you know he had some tragedies on the off the field with I believe they had a miscarriage or something with him and his former his ex-wife, and that is Gene Segura of the Philadelphia Phillies. I like the guy. He's a hitter's hitter, and low-key, just super consistent. Every year, he's going to give you good bat-to-ball skills, give you okay defense. He's not going to blow up the league or anything like that. He's not going to be the one that is your Paul Goldschmidt or even your Trea Turner or what have you, but I know what I'm getting from him. So while I wish I could have had Jazz Chisholm, because like you said, he is one of the coolest players in the league, I'm going to take Gene Segura, and I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, Gene Segura is pretty good. And I think to mention, I believe he was in the Ketel Marte trade to the Seattle Mariners. I believe that's how he got off the.
Yes,
the
I think so too.
Yeah,
so look at the D-backs. Okay, look at you guys. You're doing something.
I was going to pull up the trade exactly. Yeah. To the Seattle Mariners and then the D-backs. And they also got back Taijuan Walker, I forget. And also in that deal, it was Mitch Haniger going to the Mariners as well. So very interesting fat trade. I mean, Ketel Marte, Taijuan Walker coming back, and then Mitch Haniger and Gene Segura going to the Mariners. Huge blockbuster trade at that time. So maybe a win-win for both sides as well, because Gene Segura is a good player going there, and then we get Ketel Marte back, and then it's another deal where it's like, oh, Taijuan Walker, future All-Star. Let's just let him walk. Maybe he should have been on this list too among players we let walk in free agency. He could potentially make this list. I might have to add him real quick to the list. Who knows? He might be a sneaky addition. But for my next pick, I won't go Taijuan Walker next, but now that I just thought about him, I might add him at the bottom of this list of players of our player pool here.
Yeah.
I might think about it. But next on my list, since you went with Gene Segura, I'm also going just killing the infield right now. I'm just slaying the infield, and I think I'm going to go with the guy who I debated taking in my last round. He was drafted number 1 overall and then traded immediately for Shelby Miller, who was one of the worst pitchers in baseball at the time of the acquisition. He had like a 7+ ERA and was just absolutely terrible for the D-backs. Meanwhile, Dansby Swanson, slow start to his career, but now you look at the last couple of seasons, Dansby Swanson's the World Series winner. He's turned into one of the best defensive players in baseball. He's tapped into some power. Great defensive player, I think I already said. So Dansby Swanson, maybe his offensive ceiling is not super high, but what he can do defensively, a little pop, a little bit of speed. I'm taking Dansby Swanson right here, former number 1 overall pick.
Yeah, and maybe he's discovered something this year. I mean, 284, 340 on base. He's done a little bit better this year, but I think that it's a little bit similar to Segura. Like, there's a high floor here, and he has tapped into a little bit more power. I know he's got 17 bombs, 17 steals, probably a 20-20 guy. I'm curious to see who ends up with him in the offseason after he becomes a free agent. That should be really interesting, because with the amount of extensions the Braves have been giving out lately, with Austin Riley, with Michael Harris, something tells me he's not coming back. So very curious to see where Mr. Dansby Swanson goes. Love the pick, sir, but I got a better one for you.
Okay.
I got a better one for you. And I need people to hear me out on this one, okay? I know that it's been a little bit rough lately for this lad. I know that he kind of had a lost season, and the only time he made news was when he was sticking up for Tim Anderson in that whole debacle with Josh Donaldson. But when you look at some of his best seasons, and when you still think about, how he's been, even with the White Sox, I'm going with the best catcher in this.
Okay.
That is Yasmani Grandal, an absolute beast at the plate. He is kind of a little bit got that Joey Gallo thing going, where all walks and then home runs. And unlike Joey Gallo, though, that's great for a catcher, because catchers, if you can give us anything offensively, if it's just a lot of home runs and on base, then I'll take it. I'll absolutely take it. Former Padre, believe it or not. I'm actually looking up who they traded him for, and I'm scared to, because I remember it being bad. If I'm not mistaken. Let me see. It was... It was for Matt Kemp. That's right. It was the Matt Kemp trade. This is back in the 2014 era for that 2015 season. I forgot that he was the Kemp one. I thought he was for Kimbrel. But, that's who I'm taking with my next pick. A little bit of a savvy move on my part, I must say. But I love it. I feel good about it.
That's interesting. I don't hate that. Yasmani Grandal, clearly the best catcher. I don't think I'm getting a catcher today if I didn't get Yasmani Grandal. So that's a tough one right there. I'm debating these next 2 guys I have pretty close. Depends how I want to build my team, but I think if I take this player, I might screw over your team, because I don't know how many good pitchers are left. So next up, I'm taking big game James Shields, who is just one of the most underrated pitchers in all of baseball from the 2010s. I mean, this guy He was a borderline number one option, finished third in Cy Young voting one season, just an innings eater. I'm looking at it now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 straight seasons of over 200 innings pitched. That's why they call him Big Game James Shields. He was a career basically in his prime around like a 3.3 ERA, giving you 200 innings pitch, decent strikeout numbers as well for the guy. So I'm going Big Game James Shields here to just clean out my rotation. I got Greinke, I got James Shields, and then Kimbrel out my bullpen. Nasty pitching staff by me, nasty.
That is pretty nasty. I'm not gonna lie, man. That's really good. I probably should have addressed the pitching a little bit more, but no matter, ladies and gentlemen, no matter. It does not matter.
We don't need pitching.
With now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, with my second to last pick of this draft, the question is: do I go for the pitcher or do I go for the batter? And ladies and gentlemen, because of that Robbie Ray Max Fried combo, one of them that should have been Greinke, but I messed up. But it's okay. I'm gonna go with. I wanna do. It's actually really tough here. It's just between two players, but I gotta do it for the bit. I gotta do it for the fact that the Padres in 2019 got significantly less fun and good after trading him. There's all these nice videos of him talking to kids on the side and whatnot. Randomly got DFA'd by the Cleveland Guardians this year, but has been doing a lot better for Chicago. I have to go Franmil Reyes. I have to. I don't like it. There's another player I should have gone instead, but I'm going with Franmil Reyes because that's my brother, and I have to.
Franmil Reyes, your brother. A big power bat. He's had a pretty interesting career because he's basically been like a DH kind of a guy, big power bat. Basically been, he's got 2 seasons with over 30 home runs. He's been kind of like an underrated player in baseball. It feels like no one wants to like commit to Franmil Reyes. Feels like no one wants to be like, I want this guy to be, the cornerstone, however position he plays for the next 4 years. It feels like he's like just a hop around kind of guy, spend a season or two in an organization, then move on to somewhere else. So I don't know why no one wants to keep Franmil Reyes more long term. I mean, the Guardians, I guess, have had him for a few seasons, but he's been a solid player throughout his major league career, been pretty productive. So I do not hate that pick at all. So that was your second to last pick, because I got 1, 2, 3, 4. I got 4 picks, so I need 2 more position players. Okay, so this is the second to last pick. So next up for me, so that leaves the guy who I want still on the board perfectly, because this is going to really just even out my lineup. Let me make sure I pull up how we traded him away, because this guy is technically a former D-back. I think I mentioned he was in that Ketel Marte trade to the Seattle Mariners along with Gene Segura. Because I'm bringing home a guy who hasn't really done much this season because of injury. But in 2021, he had, in 2021, he had 39 home runs. He had an 804 OPS, finished 20th in MVP voting. In 2018, he was an all-star as well with 26 home runs, at 859 OPS, finished 11th in MVP voting that season. I'm going with Mitch Haniger to fill out my outfield spot. Still I thought he was going to be younger, actually 31 years old, so not super young. But in terms of mileage on his body, he's young because he's been hurt throughout his major league career. So he only has 2 seasons where he's played over 100 games. So guess what? Even though he's 31 years old, Javi, he's going to be fresh coming to my team because he hasn't played a lot of games throughout his major league career.
Hey, man, it's good. That's who I was debating about taking. He's excellent. I mean, he's an excellent player, and I think that it's who I've taken. I think he's just a home run beast. And yes, the defense isn't always great, but then again, I just took Franmil Reyes, who literally plays DH because of the bad defense. So yes, the defense isn't always great for him. And also, in fairness, not to slander your team a little bit, this is even slander, but just pointing out the negative, is very often injured. So that's one area that could be a place of concern for your team as a whole, because Jazz Chisholm has had some injury issues. Trea Turner in the past had some injury issues.
Poke holes in my team right now. Look at this.
I'm just throwing it out there. Franmil's always there for you. You know what I mean? But no, it's a great pick. And Mitch Haniger, one of the most underrated guys in the outfield, at least in the American League, because the guy just hits bombs. So I love that pick, sir. And I'm going to close out my draft with the guy who the Padres sent over in the trade for Austin Nola. I don't care if he's not technically a closer. You know why? Because if it wasn't for the fact that the Mariners really like Paul Sewald, he'd be a closer on the Padres right now, probably. And that is Andres Munoz. That's right. They didn't just give up Ty France. They didn't just give him up. They also gave up Andres Munoz, only at 23 years old. And Millard, He's absolutely lighting it up. 2.83 ERA. His expected stats are incredible with slugging, with his walk percentage, with his whiff percentage, especially on his slider, which is just his absolute knockout pitch. Opponents are only hitting, if I'm not mistaken, 121 against his slider. So that's his killer pitch. And he touches 100 miles per hour on average on that fastball. So if he can make the movement on his fastball a little bit better, just a tiny bit better, this could be, seriously, a guy that years from now, when people are looking at this draft that the two of us did today, they'll say, yeah, Millard did get Kimbrel, don't get me wrong, but that Andres Munoz dude turned out to be an incredible relief pitcher. So that's who I'm taking for my last pitcher, and I feel electric about it.
That's interesting. Andres Munoz. We'll see what the people say about that one on Twitter, because to close out my drafts, I could go with the D-backs fan favorite here. I could go David Peralta, freight train, right? That's what the D-backs fans want. That would be the spiritual thing that they want, but that's not where I'm going. I'm going maybe a little bit against the grain because I think he's a rarity with what his skill set could do, because there's not a lot of left-handed power hitting shortstops. So I'm going to go with D.D. Gregorius here.
Oh, no! They're going to cook you for this one, man.
I'm going with D.D. Gregorius because it's hard. Back at the time when he was playing, he was like one of the only left-handed power-hitting shortstops basically in all of baseball. Like what he was doing with the Yankees at that time, like there quite literally weren't many shortstops doing what he was doing at that time. So because of the rarity of what he can do at his position, maybe like David Peralta a little bit more as a player, but you got to think about value here, right, Javi? It's like running backs in fantasy football. Yeah, this wide receiver might score more points than Josh Jacobs, but the running backs are just going to fall off so quickly. So you got to take Josh Jacobs over that really good wide receiver sometimes that you don't really want to do. So that's why I'm taking DD here. Maybe David Peralta is the better player, but I think the smarter team for building out my team is to go DD Gregorius.
I disagree. I think this is my least favorite pick of yours. I know it's the end of the draft. The defense isn't great. He was hitting to the short porch, but I will say this. Great vibes pick. I loved watching Didi whenever the Yankees were on. I remember someone that if everyone ever made fun of his post-game tweets when he would use all the emojis and whatnot, they were so adorable. I love them. And everyone tried to figure out, who's that emoji? Oh, it means Brett Gardner. Who's this emoji? He did a little bit for the Phillies too, which was a lot of fun. And I remember some people would be like, oh, look at the grammar issues here. And then people in the comments would like yell at that person and be like, he literally knows 5 languages. Leave him alone. Didi Gregorius is a 5-language king. In terms of just vibes, I love Didi. He was at one point probably one of my favorite current players in baseball just because he's so easy to root for. Great smile, all that stuff, regardless of his actual playing ability. So, Millard, that about does it. Look at our draft. Let's run it through one more time. My 3 pitchers, Robbie Ray, Max Fried, and Andres Munoz. My position players, Paul Goldschmidt, Starling Marte, Gene Segura, Ty France, Yasmani Grandal, and Franmil Reyes. I know that's electric. And Millard, tell me about your team.
Yeah, my 3 pitchers, we got Zach Greinke, we got Craig Kimbrel, and we got big game James Shields. And then my position players, my infield is loaded. We got Trea Turner, we got Dansby Swanson, we got Jazz Chisholm, and we got D.D. Gregorius. And then the outfield, we got Mitch Haniger with J.D. Martinez as your DH. Tell me about that power and the hitting for average. Now, I would like to give an honorable mention to guys who I really debated with that last pick. I just brought up David Peralta. The other guy I really debated. If you're talking about defense, this is not going to be the guy you want to talk about. But if you're talking about just raw power, Mark Trumbo, he's got a few seasons with 30-plus home runs and an 800-plus OPS. Like, he's not the sexiest guy. But there was a time where I was like, Mark Trumbo's like a pretty underrated player in baseball. Like, if he's going to lead the league in home runs with 47 and have like 800-plus OPS, like, that's value to a team as a DH.
Absolutely. My issue with Mark Trumbo, very simple, a first-half king. This guy would never do anything in the second half, even when he was with the Orioles on those good Orioles teams. That dude was a great sight to behold, but I think a lot of Padres fans will get a lot of Hunter Renfroe vibes out of him, just not being able to keep it up for too long. That dude in this first half was always awesome, just never managed to keep it, especially because his defense wasn't all that great. Still, though, in terms of just hitting bombs, love that one. I was debating about Martin Prado. Martin Prado was really fun for the D-backs. Just a solid hitter's hitter. I actually forgot some of his stats and whatnot, but he was fun. I remember he got traded to the Yankees at one point, which was weird. But he was just the definition of kind of like a solid, okay player for a few years there. Not incredible. His peak was probably with Atlanta, but even still counts.
And
That is
basically
pretty
like
good.
a super utility, like a Ben Zobrist type,
Exactly.
where you can play like all over.
Exactly. So that's another one I thought of. But let me go back through all the rest of some players that were traded from both of our teams really quickly. From the Padres, players that weren't drafted: Eric Lauer, C.J. Abrams, who might be the first overall pick in a few years, who knows? Zach Eflin, Cal Quantrill, Luis Urias, Steven Souza, Cameron Maben, Will Venable, Manny Margot, Enyel De Los Santos, who's having a great year for the Guardians right now, Andrew Kashner, Fernando Rodney, who I forgot about, Josh Naylor, and then for the Diamondbacks, Brandon Drury, who's currently a Padre, so I couldn't draft the guy again. I mean, come on. David Peralta, Ender Enciarte, Wade Miley, mentioned Martin Prado, mentioned Mark Trumbo, Johan Duran, who's a prospect currently for the Red Sox, then Archie Bradley, and Taijuan Walker. Taijuan Walker going undrafted. Wow.
I know, because we didn't think about him at first. We didn't even have him on the list. We brought it until we were looking at the Segura trade. But after looking at it, it's like, you know what? Taijuan Walker was an all-star as soon as he left the D-backs. So maybe he should have been drafted.
He was, and he's having a good season this year, too. So, yeah, that one might be our biggest miss. Everybody, you got to let us know. But hopefully you all enjoyed this mega draft, this jumbo juicy podcast. Maybe it got you in a fantasy drafting mood. Good luck to everybody with your fantasy drafts. As someone who won and dominated all of his fantasy leagues last year, I have no pressure whatsoever, so I can't relate to people who are going to be nervous about their draft. But still, nonetheless, I hope you guys had fun. Millard, this was a great idea. As always, it's fun having you on the pod, man.
Oh, yeah, thank you. And ask Javier Reyes, who won the Locked On MLB fantasy football draft league that we had last year. Among all the Locked On MLB hosts, guess who won, ladies and gentlemen? Locked On Diamondbacks host Millard Thomas. We put no money on the line, but Paul Holden sent me $20 for Chipotle after winning. Thank you, Paul Holden.
Host of Locked On Rockies. I will say, for everybody who wants to know how capable of dark magic, apparently, that Millard's just mystic arts, he finished second to last in total points. I finished second in total points, and I didn't even make the playoffs. And this guy weaseled his way into winning that league. I had Kupp, Devontae Adams, and Jamar Chase. That is cracked. That is the most cracked receiving core ever. And I somehow didn't make the playoffs because I just got the worst matchup luck. But anyway, enough about that. Millard, it was a blast. Might even put this out on Twitter, our full rosters and whatnot. Maybe might make a little graphic. I know you're a graphic person, so you might enjoy that. But that all being said, guys, that about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast and the Locked On Diamondbacks pod. Remember, everybody, follow us on Twitter at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO, at CreatorThomas24. Locked On Diamondbacks, you'll find it, right? People are smart. At Locked On Diamondbacks. Look it up on the tubes and check it out. Yeah, you'll find it out. You know what I mean? Check the link trees. Yeah, people got it, man. People got it. People are smart. Our listeners are smart.
We're famous guys.
Yeah, exactly. We're famous, man. With that all being said, everybody, stay safe. And, of course, stay faithful, my Friar Faithful homies and Dbacks homies. Take care.